We're going to take a look at redirection now. When we normally look at the output from commands or files, they're going to get sent to either standard out or standard error. Using 1 and greater than, or just greater than, redirects any of your standard output to a file. 2 greater than will redirect standard error, your error output. If we use ampersand and greater than, then it redirects both standard out and standard error. But the next thing to be aware of, if we're using the greater than, then we're overwriting the existing file, so the content is replaced. If we want to append, then it doesn't matter what we're redirecting, but we have to use the double greater than. But the best way is to learn by doing. So why don't you come out to the command line and get some really good practice on this? So first of all, let's just go through and make sure we understand about our standard output and our standard error. If I go through and do a long listing of our etc host file, this didn't error, so this is our standard output, the output that we're expecting. But if I try a file that doesn't exist, etc host, this is then error output, and it's going through to standard error, std error. So we have these two files by default, standard out and standard error. If we want to redirect it, if I go through and maybe list both of my files, so etc hosts and etc host, move that to the top so we don't have a cluttered screen, so Control and L. So we see both of our output now. But part of this is to std err, part of it is to std out. If we're not really interested in the error output, we could use 2 and greater than to redirect our standard error output. And we're saying send it through to the device file null. So that's a special file that just absorbs data, doesn't store it. We get rid of it. We're not interested in the error. So we only see our clean output. We used this earlier when we're looking at the summary in human readable format of how much space etc was taking. We were getting these errors from directories we don't have access to. But if we wanted clean output, we can strip out the errors. And we saw this with 2 greater than and going through to dev null. Now, of course, we don't need to send to dev null. That's just a special device file. There's nothing stopping me sending the output to errors. So I don't see it, but it's gone to errors. But I can always go through and look at it. Think of this now almost as a log file. So if errors have happened, I can go back and examine them in my own time. Again, a really useful feature of the command line. Now again, I can go through and clear my screen. Just makes it easier to read if we're not cluttered with previous commands, and then go back to my history and take a look at where I'm listing the hosts and etc hosts. And again, I can choose to redirect my error output to a log file or just a file, but file error, we can assume this is my log file. I can also then send my standard output to a file. I'm just going to call this file out. I don't need to use the number 1, but it might make it clearer to understand what's going on. So now I don't see any output from the screen, but I can check my error output from the file error, and I can check my standard output from file out. So again, these become really useful, storing the information for reading back later. But if I want them to go to the same file, let me just clear some of this, and I can use then ampersand and greater than. So both are going to the same location now, but we are overwriting. So when I look in file out, I have the combined content, but not the previous content. In the same way, if I execute the command again, but this time put a double greater than, we're going to have 2 lines duplicated. So our output now is recorded twice. And then as we are writing to this, we are adding to the content. When we're appending, we can also create new files. It doesn't have to be appending to existing files.